Now that we have Ruby installed, we're ready to install RubyGems. RubyGems help us to manage the different Ruby libraries that we'll be needing. RubyGems is the name of the package manager application, and a single Ruby gem, or just gem for short, is simply Ruby code that's been packaged up for easy distribution using the RubyGems package manager. Rails makes extensive use of RubyGems. In fact, as you'll see, Rails is itself a gem. Let's take a look. Let's start by going into the terminal in the command line, and we'll just type gem-v to see if you have it installed. Now, if you have macOS 10.45 or 6, you should have a version of RubyGems already there. So gem-v will show you that you have it and show what version's there. You see I have version 1.3.5. That's not the latest version, but it is what ships standard with Snow Leopard. Now, if you don't have it installed at all, then you'll want to either upgrade your OS to Snow Leopard, or you'll want to follow one of the guides that I mentioned in the Ruby installation movie. Right after it goes through on how to install Ruby, immediately after that it talks about how to install RubyGems. And I'll show you where those packages for RubyGems are located in just a moment. Let's assume for now that you do have it installed. We can type which gem, and that'll tell us where that's located. If we want to use RubyGems, we can just type gem list, and it'll show a list of all the packages of Ruby code that we have installed. You'll see that Rails is listed there. You see I have Rails 2.3.5, 2.2.2, and 1.2.6 all installed. Now we'll want to use Rails 3.0. But first, let's start by updating our copy of RubyGems to make sure that we have the latest version of that. So we can type sudo gem update -- system. Now the sudo command, if you haven't come across that before, is saying that we want to execute this command as a super user. Sudo is super user do. And it will ask me for a password once I do that. That's going to be the same password that we would type in when we would do a software installation. It's your master password. And that will then update RubyGems and put them into a central repository of RubyGems. If we weren't to type sudo, then it might put it in our local user repository instead. You can do either one, and if you're the only user of your machine, it probably doesn't make that much difference. But just to make sure that all your gems up in one place, I recommend that anytime you're doing installing or updating of gems, you use that sudo. It makes sure they go in sort of a top-level repository at the center of your system and not in just your local user folder. So now if we type gem-v, you'll see that it comes up and tells us 1.3.7. That's the latest version at the time that I created this. Don't worry if yours is newer than what I have. I also want to show you can do gem-help, and that will then give you help about it, and it'll tell you how you can find out more about how to use RubyGems. I also want to show you the RubyGems website. If we go to Firefox, RubyGems.org. This is the main repository for gems. We can search for gems from here. It'll give you instructions on how to install all of them. There's also documentation here that you can browse. And you can see that you can also install RubyGems here. So this gives you instructions on how to install. It doesn't walk you through all the steps. This is where you would get the files that you wanted from right here to get the latest version. Now, it doesn't actually give you step-by-step instructions on how to download and compile your RubyGems. You would still want to use those guides for that. But this would help you to locate the current version to make sure that you always had the latest version. Or you can install an old version and then just run that same gem update system that I ran. Now that we have RubyGems installed, it will be really easy for us to install not just Rails, but also other Ruby libraries that we'd like to use while we're developing with Rails. It's going to become a very essential tool, and you'll be glad you have it. Now let's move on to installing Rails.